March 10th, 1953. Against the backdrop of the Korean War and the recent death of Joseph Stalin, a confrontation is about to erupt in the skies over the border of West Germany and Czechoslovakia. Two American F-84 Thunderjets have been scrambled to intercept two Czech aircraft that have strayed too close to the border between East and West. What was normally a routine game of cat and mouse between Cold War adversaries is about to take an unexpected turn. As the American F-84s close with the Czechs and identify them as advanced MiG-15s, the Czech aircraft don't turn back for their bases like they normally do. What happens next is the only military engagement between the United States and Czechoslovakia during the Cold War. This is the story of the air battle of Merklín. Welcome back, and in this video, I plan to go over one of the lesser known incidents of the Cold War. First, I'll go over the background and lead up to the incident before covering the incident itself, as well as the controversy surrounding the entire confrontation. First, let's go over the background of the conditions that ultimately led to the air battle. During the Cold War, and even up until today, the US and our adversaries have often engaged in a game of cat and mouse in the skies throughout the world. Usually, these were cases of aircraft venturing close to the airspace of the US, Soviet Union, or other nations of the Eastern and Western blocs to test the responses of the air forces of one another. The vast majority of these occurred without incident. For example, between 1961 and 1991, there were over 300 occasions when U.S. aircraft intercepted Soviet aircraft that were approaching U.S. airspace near Alaska alone. This was repeated hundreds of times elsewhere in the world, including in Europe. These types of intercepts were no different along the border of West Germany and Czechoslovakia in the 1950s. It was common for Czech and American aircraft to patrol the border between the two nations regularly. In addition, it was also common for the Czechs to push incredibly close to the border to elicit a response from the US. Normally, the F-84s based at Fürstenfeldbruck Air Base in southern Germany would be scrambled to intercept. The Czechs would normally break off and return to their bases once visual contact was made. Now, the American F-84 Thunderjets were the U.S. Air Force's primary fighter bomber at the time. While it wasn't the most capable fighter aircraft, especially when you compare it to the F-86 Sabre or Soviet-built MiG-15, it was believed to be sufficient for the Czech aircraft it was expected to face. The most prominent Czech fighter aircraft was the Avia S-199, which was a Czech-built version of the Me-109 from World War II. By the 1950s, the aircraft was largely obsolete, but beginning in 1952, the Czech Air Force began receiving Soviet-built MiG-15s, which were the most advanced fighter aircraft in the Soviet arsenal and had put into service to great effect in the Korean War. The US began to encounter small numbers of these Czech MiGs on these intercept missions, though again, they normally returned to their bases once they were intercepted, but that was all about to change. On March 5th, 1953, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin died after ruling the Soviet Union with an iron fist for nearly 30 years. This led to both the Eastern and Western blocs being on high alert as Soviet leadership worked through their leadership transition. This would come to a head on March 10th. At around 10:40 a.m., two Czech aircraft were picked up on radar heading towards the West German border. Two F-84s, piloted by Lieutenant Warren Brown and Lieutenant Donald Smith, were given the order to scramble and intercept the aircraft. By 10:59, the F-84s made visual contact with the Czechs and identified the two aircraft as MiG-15s. The aircraft then crossed each other's path and the MiGs turned and got on the tails of the F-84s. The F-84s then began to turn back towards their base, expecting that the MiGs would break off and head home. Instead, the MiGs began to turn with the F-84s, beginning a turn battle that the swept-wing MiGs held the advantage in. For Lieutenant Brown, in his F-84, he tried in vain to prevent the MiG from getting on his tail. Still, he did not expect the MiG to fire on him. To make matters worse, he had neglected to jettison the 2 wingtip fuel tanks on his aircraft, worsening its maneuverability disadvantage. Meanwhile, the Czech MiGs had been cleared to engage. The MiG on Brown's tail fired a short burst that struck his right wing and the external fuel tank located on it. He also suffered damage to his right horizontal stabilizer. Brown then straightened out his aircraft and began to fly back towards his airbase. The Czech MiG fired a second burst at the F-84, which ignited a fire and severely damaged the already battered right wing. Brown, realizing the nature of his situation, ejected out of the aircraft successfully. Brown's wingman, Lieutenant Smith, managed to evade the second MiG by ducking below the cloud cover and getting out of sight. By 11:09, the MiGs headed back to their base. The entire engagement lasted only 10 minutes. Brown survived almost unscathed with just a minor injury to his ear. Controversy over the incident started almost immediately. Both the US and the Czechs issued conflicting claims about where the engagement took place. The US claimed that it took place entirely within West Germany, and Lieutenant Brown and Smith both believed that they had been in German territory the entire time. The evidence they cited for this was the fact that Brown's F-84 crashed 22 miles inside West Germany, and that Brown had landed in West Germany after ejecting. The Czechs claimed that it took place within Czechoslovakia over the town of Merklín. This was per the report of the Czech pilots themselves, with one of them believing that the crashed F-84 and the downed pilot would be recovered by Czech forces. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. There was a large amount of cloud cover that would have made it difficult for either side to identify exactly where they were at any given point. So it's likely that the engagement may have started inside Czechoslovakia before spilling over into West Germany when Brown was shot down after the MiGs had continued their pursuit. Czech pilot Jaroslav Šrámek is the only Czech pilot to ever score an air-to-air kill against an opposing jet. This incident was followed just 2 days later, on March 12th, by a second incident where 2 MiG-15s of the Soviet Union shot down a British bomber flying to West Berlin that further inflamed tensions at the time, though they were able to quickly be diffused diplomatically. This air battle between the US and Czechoslovakia is just one of many such incidents throughout the Cold War. If there are any others that you would like me to cover, please let me know in the comments below. In the meantime, please leave a like on this video so it can help reach more people, and feel free to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you on the next one.